I'm Chad Grevalese with Aerolite TV and your host of the show, Connect Up. If you're looking to gain traction in your career or business, you're at the right place because here we talk about connection. You need to know how to connect with the right people in the right way so you can build valuable relationships that lead you to career success. We have conversations about how to find your voice in your career. I interview communication experts, time and focus masters, and everyday people who have stories to tell of challenges overcome, goals achieved, and how their inner and outer communication and ultimately their relationships accelerated their progress and elevated their journey. Success in life is just a collection of the right conversations with yourself and others. Connect up to a better version of yourself. Connect up to your goals and a brighter future. Disconnect from the things that are holding you back and connect your way to where you want to be. Welcome back to Connect Up. I'm really excited about today's conversation because I get to speak with Krystin Wahl all about voice. Voice is the core of communication. It's the vessel by which we communicate. We use our voice to make every choice in our life. Our voice is the greatest asset that we have. And I'm really excited to just get really scientific today about how your voice creates your life, how your voice creates your negative and your positive experiences. And we're talking about the inner voice of what's going on in your mind and the outer voice of what's coming out as you're communicating with people and how those things relate to each other, how they connect with each other, and when they're not in sync, what kind of problems that can cause. And so Krystin Wahl is a vocal essence expert, and she specializes in reading the energy of voice, because voice, when we communicate, words come out of our mouth, but behind those words is energy and tone, and it's ultimately the energy that we pick up on when we're listening to people talk. And it's what causes us to feel certain things. It's what causes us to decide to trust somebody or not trust them. And so Krystin, she enjoys teaching others about how to use the asset of your voice to work for you in your business, relationships, and personal matters. And she's also a singer and a songwriter and a keynote speaker, a mentor, a homeschooling mother to 4 children, and a wife to a man that she dreamed of marrying at the age of 13. And so she believes in the phrase, speak yourself rich. And she'll talk about what she means by the word rich later in this episode. But in today's episode, we're going to talk about the subconscious. We're going to talk about the role of your subconscious and your inner voice and how that affects ultimately what occurs in your life. We're going to talk about how to use your voice better and how to get a grip on your voice so that your voice can ultimately create what you want, and how to break the cycle of negative things happening in your life. And we're going to talk about how your voice really is a skill that just needs to be developed. It's like learning how to play an instrument. Your voice is an instrument, and you just need to learn how to play that instrument properly if you want it to work for you. And so we'll talk about finding your voice and what she defines as finding your voice, and how the word find can actually mean a negative thing, and we'll discuss that a little bit. And we'll talk about how the definitions behind our words. So by the end of this episode, I know that you will have some really great insight into how you can use your voice better to create your life, and how you can upgrade the way that you're talking to yourself and upgrade the way that you're talking to other people so that you can manage that instrument that is your voice that ultimately is creating the negative and the positive in your life. And if you want to upgrade your career, and if you want to upgrade your ability to connect with people, it all starts with understanding how your voice works. And Krystin is an expert on how the voice works. So with that said, let's welcome Krystin to the show.
Thank you for having me on this episode. I'm super honored to be here.
So Krystin, you are an expert on voice, and I love that because on this show we talk a lot about connection, and we talk about communication, and we talk about networking, we talk about building our career and being able to find success, but also the type of success that involves actual happiness and fulfillment in our life. In previous episodes and other videos, I've talked about how we have our inner voice and we have our outer voice, and I'm excited to really talk to you a lot today about voice and about what that has to do with our success. And so can you just kind of give us a quick update on who you are and what's your story? What brought you to where you are today, where you are a vocal essence expert?
So from a very young age, I've been very sensitive to, I guess you would call it sound vibrations. I could I could feel the energy behind when people spoke, and really understand the message, because you have the words that you speak and then you have the message behind that message. And so I was very, very sensitive to picking up the message behind the message. And I didn't realize that, but as I went to college and school, the things that I was interested in, it just kind of guided me along those certain talents or gifts, however you describe that. So I attended college for vocal pedagogy. It's a super big word, but it just means the study of the voice. I was fascinated about how it worked. And then I got into the psychology of the voice, and that is really interesting. And I went performing and touring all over the world with the Young Americans. It's a vocal performing and dancing group. And I got to really be immersed in this and fell in love with people and the cultures and just the different way that we communicate. And yet we're all the same. The one universal language is always said to be music, but it's really sound. That's what it is. It's sound vibration. So that energy behind the words and the messages is what really drove me to get clear on this and really study the psychology and the physiology. And so now I've been working with people for about 15 years. I listen to their language a lot and pretty much help set them free to move forward with personal, business, relationships, any kind of success that they're desiring, the blocks that they come up against, their language, their energy of voice. It'll all reveal what those blocks are. So it's really cool.
That's really interesting. That's it's you don't hear very often of people who have that type of emphasis on, because you have you have voice coaches who train singers and actors even on the specific delivery of your voice, and it seems like you're taking it a step further where it's really getting into the underlying meaning behind the sound that is coming out of our mouth, opposed to even just the words. And I guess what you talked about listening to people's language. What are some things that you pay attention to when you hear people speak behind the words or even in the words? Like, what are some things that signal to you certain meaning? I'm sure that that's there's a ton of information on that, but what's just something that comes to mind as far as what you pay attention to?
Yes. So there's energy and spiritual compositions that I like to include in it. And there's some just divine laws that I like to pattern my I guess codes that I'm looking for after. And one of those is, decree a thing and it shall be established unto you. And so what I'm listening to when people are speaking is they are using that to decree certain things. And our language is confounded and confusing. The subconscious brain is literal. So when we speak, it doesn't know that we're joking or sarcastic. It takes things literal. And our words, our reality is shaped by our language and our words. And so as I'm listening to people, I get into my literal brain listening, okay, how would that really work? If somebody says, oh my gosh, this is mind blowing, like you imagine somebody's brain exploding, like there's interesting concepts to really get detailed and direct with exactly what you're wanting to create. And your outcome, the results that you have right now are a result of that language that you've used up till now. And in a moment, you can reverse it all. You can reverse anything. And I love the word reverse, because the word reverse literally means to reverse, re-speak, re-say, or re-decree. And in that moment, you have shifted and changed your reality. So like one specific word phrase that is very common in our universe and our language right now is, I feel like this might happen, or I feel like this. And that's not a feeling at all, and so we're super disconnected from what creates. Going into kind of quantum physics, you've got thought, words, and feelings. And that's the trinity to manifestation: thought, word, and feeling. And we are literally saved by the word. So, but the word yet creates feeling, and our feeling is a senior partner to manifestation. So what you are truly feeling is also creating. You may have heard, perspective. It's all your attitude towards the problem. It's not the actual problem, it's your attitude towards it. And it is, that's true. How you feel about things is what really generally propels your reality into motion too. So as I'm listening, I hear a lot of people who are disconnected from their feeling body, is what I call it. And I feel like is a code of codependency. That means you are not connected to your feelings at all anymore. You have placed your happiness outside of you in the hands of others, and you've got to get back into co-empowerment, basically. But that's a big one that I see right now. I will even, as I'm working with my clients, they'll say it 3 or 4 times in just one, as they speak a paragraph, and I'll point it out to them, say, okay, what do you actually feel? I feel sad, or I feel angry, like we're super disconnected from those emotions. So as I bring it up, it's basically just a confusing pattern language that doesn't really create anything. So we shift that. But yeah, that's one.
I love that. I love language. I love how much meaning is strung in between words and even our definitions for words. I like how you brought up the word reverse, how we're declaring something in a different way. It's not like almost like redefining as well. And it's just, there's so much to this. And I want to kind of go back to when you were talking about how voice creates a reality. Can you outline for us maybe the simple version of how your voice ultimately creates a reality? Because I love talking about that, because I love how it is so important to realize that the things we're telling ourselves and the things we're telling other people are ultimately creating our reality. So how does that work?
Yes, I do. I love to break it down into simple kind of systems or strategies. And the 3, thought, word, and feeling, like that is a simple system to kind of look at. So how voice is shaped in there, I know you talk about inner voice a lot, and that is definitely like your thoughts, and those thoughts that you agree to, and that's the key. The thoughts that you agree to are what you potentially then create with. So somebody, and I've always found this fascinating, you can have 2 children growing up in the same household, and it's less than optimal circumstances, yet one thrives and one pretty much is trying to survive. What's the difference? And as I talk to certain individuals about this, with their languaging, it'll come up in their codes and reveal what agreements they had made. They agreed with somebody that I'm not good enough, or I can't do this. I'm not worthy. Those are huge ones that I see, like underlying. And then the other one, when those circumstances were presented to maybe make an agreement that I'm not good enough, or they chose to not agree to that. And so it's agree or not agree. And the cool thing is that you have that choice. You have that agency to agree or not agree. And it's not right or wrong. There's no judgment with this. That's what I love about it, is you just notice that your language shows where you are, and you can change it in an instant and say, okay, well, I don't really want to agree with that anymore. And I'm going to now choose that I am good enough. And that is where the power lies. You have to remember the Trinity thing: thought, word, and feeling. You have to feel what good enough feels like. Come from the outcome. what would that feel like? And as you begin to feel, then you create that.
That's really interesting with the agreements because when you brought up, you can have two kids that are growing up in essentially the same situation, but obviously they're growing up in actually totally different worlds because they're making their own individual agreements. And it just gets me thinking about how, with my own situation, I grew up in a home where there was a bit of anger, and there was yelling, and voice was mismanaged, and words were mismanaged, and the way that I interpreted it, I guess the agreements I made with myself was voice is a bad thing, so I'm going to stay quiet. And so I was very quiet all growing up into adulthood. It held me back in my career pursuits for a while until I found people to help me overcome my communication issues. And I'm like, hey, I need to learn how to talk, and I need to learn how to communicate, and I need to be okay with my voice. But all growing up, I was not. And I was very insecure with my voice because I was afraid that if I let my voice out, maybe I would hurt somebody because I saw voice hurting. And so then I made that agreement, whereas my brother, basically in the exact same situation, he was only a year and a half younger than me. I mean, he was in the same situation all grown up, pretty much all the same events. I mean, he was there, but he kind of took the opposite approach where, I mean, he wasn't quiet at all. And he almost used his voice to then defend and protect himself, whereas he kind of used it to be more aggressive to deal with what he was feeling and his emotions, whereas I was taking more of a withdrawal approach. And so I can totally relate to that, like just experiencing how we made those agreements with ourselves.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love that you shared that because it happens all the time. And we are creatures of habit, and we mimic others. And who else do we know how to mimic than those who are speaking around us? We adopt the agreements. And one thing that I make sure to tell people, your parents did the best that they could with what they knew how. They generally, I just choose to make that agreement, whether it's true in every situation or not. Like, I choose to just agree that, they tried the best that they could.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to us to then awaken to the realization that we can make a new choice and a new agreement. And I love that you took that and made that new agreement. Your greatest weakness shall become your greatest strength. So I see that.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, how can people, I was well into my 20s before I even had the help to even become aware of the fact that I made those agreements. What can people do on an ongoing basis to even become aware of when their thoughts are speaking and then they agree with it? I know that a lot of that can happen without us even being aware of it. So how can people become more aware so they can actually choose to disagree with a specific thought? Like, what's something that people can do?
Yeah, it's you're really it's given to you by your atmosphere. Like, there's some people who will go their whole lives not knowing this kind of information, and it's really sad, which is why I want to be an advocate for, reclaim your power. Your voice is one of the greatest assets that you hold. Nobody can take that away from you. But there are just circumstances where people are never immersed in this idea that you don't have to agree with other people, and it just happens to be where they're put in their community, the people they live with. But once you have that thought of, there's got to be something better, your brain will then search for it, and I truly believe you will find it. The right people will come. They'll just cross your path, and you'll be then given these little bits and pieces that will lead you to finding something like this.
That's true. That's true. That it literally, like, once you make that choice of like there must be something better, then yeah, you're right that your brain starts looking for. It just immediately becomes more aware, and all of a sudden you're hearing your thoughts that maybe you didn't hear before. And then you can consciously make that choice of, okay, I'm not going to agree with that one, because I like you separate that, because sometimes we think that our thoughts I mean, sometimes we think our thoughts are even all ourselves. It could just be voices that got in our head from other people growing up and all sorts of stuff. And so it's important to be able to decipher through our thoughts and realize that our thoughts aren't always like who we are necessarily. It's like we're almost observing our thoughts. We're the person in there that's observing these voices and our thoughts, and we have to know whether to agree with it or not, so that we don't, like create really bad situations for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Can you explain a little bit more about you talk about the relationship between the psychology and the physiology of voice. Can you describe that link to us a little bit more?
Oh, yes, yes. So physiology of the voice, it's pretty basic. It all begins with breath. And breath is very powerful, especially if you're a spiritual person. In scripture it talks about, and God breathed breath in through the nostrils of man, and he became a living soul. And it's through that breath that comes in us, and we are able to speak on that breath. So we add our own thoughts and words to that power, which essentially builds and creates, or destroys and tears down. You can use it both ways. And it sounds like you have watched that happen, in childhood or whatever. But that's basically physiology. How the voice works and talks. It's a stringed instrument and a wind instrument. We use it daily, and yet nobody's ever practiced it. We wouldn't just grab the tuba and go out on the street and start playing, expecting people to love what we're giving and actually compensate us for it. We have to practice. We have to get good at it. And there's so many people who have never learned how to use their voice effectively. And so they're just using the sounds that they've mimicked from their surrounding. And if you look at your surrounding, those are the results that will create, right? If you don't like the results that the people were around you created, if you want to opt into something better, then you've got to do something different. You've got to upgrade your voice. And that's physiology. The psychology also connects to that as well, but it incorporates the energy that you're putting the sound to with that breath, like the agreements. It'll show up in your language of just like what we talked about. You can hear the codes. I'm not good enough. In fact, I worked with a client just earlier last week, Monday, and she's a virtual assistant. She creates websites for individuals, and she charges $1,200. And I said, wow, that's actually pretty cheap. I think that's cheap. I paid $8,000 for my website package. I'm like, that's not expensive at all. And yet she was having a hard time having people opt in and work with her and buy that. And I said, okay, well, let's check in. I said, what are you worth? So she listens to herself, and the first number that came up to her was 500. I said, well, 500 what? Your brain's literal. 500 paper clips? Like, what are you worth? She says, okay, no, it's $500. I said, okay, this is the psychology of the voice. Here you are offering packages at $1,200, and the message behind your voice is saying, I'm only worth 500. It doesn't align. It doesn't match. Even though it's cheap, people will feel that message, that confusingness, and they'll just get a gut feeling of, this isn't right for me. And it's not right or wrong. Like I told her, whatever price you pick, just know you're priceless. It doesn't matter. You have high end, you have low end. All that shows is where people are at and the value that they hold themselves at. So match the value. And I gave her certain, tools to up her value to match whatever she chose to put her pricing at. And this was last Monday. I talked to her yesterday. She had 4 clients book with her in that instant. In that instant that you bring awareness and you begin to shift and up your value, your whole world and reality begins to change. Like I just had to laugh. Like she just couldn't even believe it. 4 clients. And I said, well, when's the last time you had a client? I haven't. I said 4 in 1 week. Like, that is evidence, it was pretty cool.
Wow. So basically what you're saying is that, she had a potential client that would ask her, what's your price? And she would say 1,200. She would say 1,200, but what she really was saying was 500.
Yes.
And we do that all the time. Our outer voice is not in sync with our inner voice, and so we say things and then we wonder, well, what the heck? Why am I not creating a reality here? Because ultimately you might be saying one thing, but inside you're saying a different thing, and that's the energy that comes out with your voice. So she says 1,200, but even if she thinks that she sounded confident enough just by a basic analysis of what a confident voice sounds like, the other person, without even realizing it, picked up subconsciously on that underlying tone, that subtle energy of I'm only worth 500, and then the other person makes the decision of I don't want to go with you, but they don't even know why they made that decision. They literally just feel it, and that's fascinating. That's a cool story.
It really is. It really is. And the Romans, they understood this concept. You breathe your thoughts. Whatever thoughts you're thinking, you're going to speak on that energy. And so that's what people feel. We're more sensitive to energy than we are words, because we just truly don't know how to listen yet. So we are listening with our energy, and that takes precedence. Your voice will out you. The energy behind your voice will out you. Like you can't hide it behind your words.
Yeah, and I guess too, like any language is going to be limited in its communication. The whole message comes out in the energy of it. Whereas, the English language, any language around the world, there's only so many words to describe so many messages, whereas the energy of it can describe the whole message. And once we understand that, then we realize how important it is to get a grip on that. And so how do you find your voice? I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Like, what does that mean to you to find your voice? I've been passionate about that phrase for a few years now. Because, I literally kind of went through a process of finding my voice and being shy, but I know that finding your voice can mean a lot more than just learning how to talk to people. So what does it mean to you, and what's one thing we can do to find our voice?
Yes. Okay. Great question. So finding means and implies that it's lost. And so if we're always continually using the language, I'm finding, that means that it's going to be lost, and you're always in a state of having to find. And so I go straight directly to reversing that, and it's I remember my voice. And all of a sudden, everything will come up for you to remember your voice. And it really is that simple. Basically it's that simple. I remember my voice.
That's cool. That makes a lot of sense. I think my process of finding my voice would have been easier if I was telling myself I remember my voice. Because I think as well, like that makes a lot of sense now thinking about it in hindsight of how it was almost like, when Peter Pan's chasing his shadow, like I felt like my voice was maybe attached, but over here, but I kept trying to, every time I would move towards it, it would move away. So no, that's pretty powerful, remembering our voice. How can you tie that into how we can, like you talk about speaking yourself rich? What do you mean by that? And what does our voice play a part in us becoming rich? And what does that even mean to you to be rich?
Great question. So rich, RICH, remembering I create happiness, because really that's something that, we're all striving for. We all want the validation and just to have a full measure of happiness and joy. So speaking yourself rich is really tied to happiness for myself. And anything less than that is a call for an upgrade. So those are the codes that I'm looking for. Is if I'm feeling angry, that's a call to be upgraded into my greatest authorship, me taking my power back and owning and reclaiming that power to gain more. It's almost like it fills my bucket of happiness. But these cycles, we're just in a state where we're learning and growing, and we are trying to have a full measure of happiness. and give through our gifts and talents, however that looks, be of service. But that's kind of how I look at it. Is we're watching our life cycles that keep happening over and over, or body signals. Like if we have pain somewhere, it's our body trying to communicate with us that, you know what, this isn't really the path to true happiness. Like I'm trying to communicate where we're doing, like pain in the knee is about partnershiping and forgiveness. So if we're having knee issues, like, okay, is it time to partner or forgive with, like, it'll come up to your mind and that signal will generally go away. Life is the same in patterns that it'll keep showing up. Like, I have to go through this again. Like, I just did this. Like, it keeps happening. Like the same thing keeps happening. All it is a call for an upgrade so that you can have more measures of joy and happiness. So that I look at life experience, look at body signals, I reveal the voice, the language, all of that kind of stuff all plays in to one goal of having as much happiness as you can.
That really is the meaning of rich, is having as much happiness as you possibly can. And it is interesting to think about how our bodies are constantly telling us things and signals, like you said, with the knee, and I need to forgive somebody. And so upgrading your voice really, has to do with practicing how to use it, but it sounds like it also has to do with knowing how to listen to your voice, correct?
Very much so,
That
yes.
And listening to yourself and knowing how to interpret that it's a two-way process. And in that, we all have, words can be said to have certain frequencies, but do words really have frequency, or is it our definition of that word that has frequencies? Because I guess like somebody could define the word money as a bad thing and somebody else could define it as a good thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about how our definitions of certain words affect the energy of it, I guess?
Yeah, words, I just don't look at things as either good or bad. I pull judgment all aside. It's the energy that we've attached to the word, the agreement that we've made towards the word. There's always going to be an experience had that created that feeling about the word. But the word is always the word. And the word is taken literal by your subconscious. So words like I want more happiness. That's not going to be as powerful as I choose more happiness, because want implies that there is a lack. And so literally that is telling you that I lack happiness. And so you're going to keep receiving a lack of happiness because that's what you're speaking. So I choose happiness implies that I have it, or I have happiness. Even if you don't have it at the moment, we've all maybe heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. That doesn't work. It's feel it till it becomes real. So feel what you want, feel the outcome. If you want more happiness, what does happiness feel like? Feel that you already have the amount of happiness that you're desiring. Feel that you already have it. And you can't help but have that frequency come to you. I believe it was either Tesla or Einstein that says, match the frequency that you want and you can't help but draw it to you. Something of that fact. And that's just like attracts like. And so if you're wanting something, like, become the like so you can attract the like. But you feel it. It's an emotion. And there's science, like I just read a study about how they're showing and proving that your feelings create your reality. It was pretty cool. They're doing all kinds of studies.
Wow, well that's great. Well, it sounds like overall it as you use your voice to create your life, the way that you're interpreting your thoughts, the way the agreements that you're making with yourself, the way that you're speaking to other people, the way that you're speaking to yourself, ultimately that then ties into your feelings, and then those things help you become someone that either attracts something negative or attracts something positive. And it sounds like really you're just, as far as attracting, all that means is that you're aligning who you are with something that you want. And it all starts with getting a grip on and understanding your own voice. And so that's what you've really taught us today, and that's so significant, so important. Like, what's one thing that everyone can go home tonight and do that will kickstart the process of them upgrading their voice? Some simple action.
Okay, the thing that's coming to my mind is to realize that you are a steward over your space, which I consider your body. Imagine that it's a vessel, and you can, probably now, whatever age you're at, it's going to be full of stuff, but over that vessel, implement a gatekeeper is what I call. And that gatekeeper is one who then manages what is coming into the vessel. And so if there's certain thought patterns or words or feelings that you're like, that gatekeeper's now job is to say, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that. And that's its sole purpose. So having that awareness now that you're in charge of your space and what you fill yourself with, and what you fill yourself with is who you are at the moment, right? It's because you can change in an instant what you are filling your space with. The agreements, the words, the feelings, the thoughts. So take notice and set that gatekeeper and tell him your job is to agree or not agree, and just to make sure that nothing comes in without you asking, is this helping me towards creating more measures of joy and happiness? Is this helping me towards getting my goals? Is this helping me to just be a better person overall? Or is this destroying me? So that's one great way. I teach my kids that. It's a pretty simple tool.
That's great. That's really helpful, because ultimately it sounds like that tool would basically help us be able to sit in the observing seat, that we no longer confuse, because the ultimate problem, like we talked about before, is how we think these thoughts and then we automatically assume that we're just agreeing with it because it's our thought. We think, oh, that's my thought, which means I must by default have agreed with it. We don't realize that we can make a choice to not agree with it, as long as we sit in that observation seat and realize we're just observing these thoughts. We're over here, our thoughts are over here, and that tool can really help us make that separation, so then we can choose to disagree with stuff that's not helping us. And that's really great. For everyone listening, I'm sure they want to learn more from you out of what you've talked about today. Clearly, you know a lot about voice and how that wraps into our mindset and our life and how we can create a different reality. And so where can they go to learn more from you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I do have a website. It's called infuseheart.com, and it talks a little bit about what I do and shares a little bit how you can get a hold of me. I am super active actually in my Facebook group called Speak Yourself Rich, and that's where I pour on a lot of value in there. I do a Signal Saturday where the people in my group, they vote on certain signals that they want to talk about, and I go live every week with what they voted on. So I'm active in there. And then basically we can have a chat or a call. I give a free vocal assessment, a 15-minute free vocal assessment for anybody who is listening. I will do that, and you can schedule that on my website, infuseheart.com/schedule. And I would be happy to connect and share a few tips and pointers on what your voice is revealing and how to pretty miraculously shift that within those 15 minutes. Just really simply, it's neat. I love it.
That's really cool. Well, thanks for that. Those links will all definitely be in the show notes so that you can connect with her and get in her Facebook group and go to her website. And I definitely encourage you all to set up that consultation, that 15-minute assessment, that voice assessment, to get the ball rolling with upgrading your voice. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today?
Voice your choice and speak yourself rich. I'm voting everybody's victory on here. This is to create a universe or one voice that is of happiness.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for leaving us with those really inspiring words, and we're glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Chad.